he put out the press release that he was going on leave. Well, what he did is he hid out in the guardhouse. So
wow, that was innovative, right?
Yes. So that's why the story the gentleman just told rings. It rings a bell with us because we've heard stories like this before, and also the underground portion. He mentioned that they went underground. The late Leonard Stringfield, who had access to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, actually identified the building where all the Roswell stuff was kept. He called it the Pink Building, and it was one or two stories above ground, but everything else was underground. So these things all seem to come together.
Absolutely. Next up, let's go to Christian in Los Angeles. Hey, Christian, welcome to the program.
How you guys doing?
Okay, all is well.
Yeah, I just want to say I have a couple of things. I have one story to relate. Something that occurred to me about probably 3 or 4 years ago. I live in L.A., and to make a long story short, we've had a gentleman who lives in our apartment complex here who is an Army veteran. He was a full bird colonel. He's still alive. And everybody calls him the Colonel, and he's a Korean and Vietnam War veteran. And I've always heard that he had something to do with Army intelligence. So one day, it was probably about 3 years ago, I asked him a question. I said, "Look, Colonel, I watched this thing on the History Channel last night about the Roswell incident. I kind of wanted to test him because I had a feeling he probably knew."
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, "Well, what do you think about the Roswell incident?" And right before I could finish with what I was saying, he cut me off, and you could, literally, the air was so thick, you could cut it with a knife.
Yeah, he just turned his personality on you, didn't he?
And he became kind of very hostile because he didn't expect me to ask this, and he basically said, "Oh, look, I do know about what happened back in 1947. There was a crash, and it was a terrible tragedy. We went out there, and, just the bodies, yes, we did find bodies, and it was just such a terrible, terrible tragedy that, those poor little things, he died. And don't ever ask me about this ever again. I can't ever talk about it. Do you understand?" Turns around, executes a 90-degree about face, and walks away from me. And I've never mentioned anything with UFOs, to him since. So like you said, with many of these people who were part of, that generation, obviously, with people who were in the military, absolutely, whenever you ask anybody in the military about UFOs, especially Roswell, it's like you stick a hot coal under their butt. They absolutely clam up. They can't say anything. Another thing I wanted to ask, because this is the second time that I've spoken to both of the gentlemen who are on tonight's show, and I want to say, again, thank you for all the diligent work. Because
great investigators.
This has to be exposed. And the truth has to be told, because obviously we're not alone in the universe. My second thing was, I'll hurry up, with the alien that was alive, that was recovered, did the Army take or whisk it away and to, let's say, an interrogation center, and was there, a great deal learned from it? Because I go on the Internet, and I read all of this weird, strange stuff that, the aliens started essentially spilled the beans, that, and all that. So, was the alien interrogated? And I also heard that maybe 4 or 5 years after the Roswell incident, that apparently it was actually referred to as EBE, that it died. So anyway, I just want to say keep up the work, gentlemen. And also I would like to know, how do I contact you? It's like with your books, do you have an email or something I can, let's say, email you or something?
Sure, through your website. And let's give that website out, Tom.
Yeah, our website is www.roswellinvestigator, that's all one word, .com, www.roswellinvestigator.com. Also, in the back of our book, do you have our book?
Go ahead.
Is the gentleman there?
He's there somewhere.
In the back of our book is all the contact information. There's a phone number. It has both Don and my email addresses, and again the website address. So you can get that information from the back of our book, or by going on www.roswellinvestigator. The question I had for the gentleman was I don't think he gave a name for the officer. Does he remember the name of the officer, the colonel?
I don't. But if I try and contact you guys, I will, and I'll mention that I called you, so you can that'll ring a bell. But everybody calls him the colonel. I don't know his full name, but I can find that out for you.
Could you please, because even without violating a confidence on your part,
right,
if it could in any way be arranged that we have a moment with him or even pay him a visit. It still comes back to why do these, especially officers, and we spoke to an officer just a few weeks ago again, and he made the very snide remark, well, you boys know the officers will never tell you the truth about what really happened out there. And they have the biggest, stake in all this. I mean, their pensions being what they are and the heavy fines as far as, but you described something, I think the best example would be the late Senator Barry Goldwater. And George certainly knowing of the situation and his confrontation with the late chair of the Joint Chiefs.
Oh, yeah, and they wouldn't tell him anything. They basically said, Senator, it's none of your business.
That's right. And LeMay telling him, and if you ever bring this up again, I will personally see that you're court-martialed. Now, that's to a brig general in the United States Air Force Reserves to begin with, and a former presidential candidate.
Tell me in the just moments we have before the break, and then we'll go back to final calls, about this photojournalist story. What was his name? Alan Grant?
Yes. Alan Grant was a life photographer. Remember, before TV.
Life magazine was it. That and Look.
Yes. Before TV, the only way people could see what was happening was through these large photo-type magazines, Life, Look, what have you. And he had just transferred to the L.A. office from New York because he wanted to be on the movie scene,
Yep.
And he got a call from the office in New York to get out to New Mexico that there was, I think they said the meteor had crashed. That was the story, that a meteor had crashed, and he was supposed to go out there and photograph it. And so he gets into a plane, flies to Albuquerque, where he's met by I believe it's a captain or major, I don't remember his rank, and there's a single-engine aircraft already running, waiting for him. And so they get in the plane, and out they fly into the New Mexico desert. And Don knows this. New Mexico has a lot of aircraft runways throughout the state. It's not like international runways, but, local aircraft runways. And they landed on one after a flight of maybe a half hour or so. And there's a Jeep waiting for them. And he goes over to the Jeep, and the pilot says, "Wait a second, sir, you're going to need this." And he hands him a revolver. It's a .45 automatic with a holster that he puts around his waist. He says, "What do I need this for?" And he says, I'm not sure, but I think you ought to have it." Now, that would worry me, what I was getting into.
Especially if he wasn't trained in how to use it, huh?
Yes. And there are pictures of him on this trip, and you can see the gun around his waist, and he's posing in front of the airplane, then posing in front of the Jeep, taken at the time. And so off they go into the desert. And his story is they drove out there for about a half an hour, and they didn't find anything. And back they come, and they get back on the plane, and they fly back to Albuquerque, and then he flies home.
And that's it?
And that was it. And for years he was, what was that all about? What was that all about? And so he didn't know anything at the time about the Roswell crash, but
I'll let you finish that when we come right back, and then we'll take final phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, the Skype line is open. Linda Moulton Howe joins us on our next Coast to Coast show with her monthly edition of Stories of High Strangeness. And when we come right back, we'll be talking with Tom Carey and Don Schmidt about Roswell with your phone calls on Coast to Coast AM.